as long as you don't bother her there. Laura Antoniou.
The Antisocial Network. Good evening, everyone. Wow, what a turnout. So check it out, like the Marketplace books are back in print. From Circlet Press in Boston. In case you don't know them, they're your source for erotic science fiction, fantasy, and paranormal stuff. So if you're into that vampire werewolf shit, you don't like them acting like they're Mormons, not sparkling, you can go to circlet.com and get my books there, even as like e-books. Ooh. And then you could get all the spaceship porn you want. This is The Man with the Phoenix Tattoo. It features the character of Chris Parker, who is, yes, this is the first time he's ventured outside of the Marketplace books. When I first started writing the Marketplace books, I gave an outline of the 3 books on 1 sheet of paper to the publisher at the time, and the only description of this character was, "and their mysterious butler." I kid you not. And I didn't know what his mystery was. I just thought everyone should have a mysterious butler. And then I made him short and temperamental, and I put a beautiful handcrafted dick in his pants. And I figured at the end of the book, everyone, oh, well, it's a trans man. For 20 fucking years, people have asked me, so what's the deal with Chris Parker? How come he doesn't have a real dick? And I'm like, I don't know. He cut it off in a mechanical rice picker accident. Finally, a couple of years ago at IMSL, I broke. And I ranted for about 2 minutes, using every positive and derogatory term for trans people I could possibly drag up from my memory, and pretty much said, Chris, he's a tranny boy, he's a trans fag, he's a new man riding on the T. And I went through this whole thing, and I literally, at IMSL, I had this audience of people going, and every once in a while I still get a piece of hate mail saying, you use the word he, she. And I said, fuck you. I write porn. Okay, we use naughty words, sometimes deliberately. I can't stand being lectured by porn readers who don't like naughty words. Anyway, this story does not have any naughty words in it. Of course I will. Why wouldn't I want to see you writhing in pain while a big burly guy hurts you? She accepted his request lightly with good cheer, and left the obvious corollary unsaid, because it had actually been a while since she'd seen any such thing. She picked him up in Brooklyn, and they kissed in the front seat of the car. It was early evening, chilly and damp. Their kiss was brief and functional. Through the open car door came the scent of fireplaces and layers of wet leaves still piled in the tiny squares in front of the brownstones, trapped in narrow spaces between the stoops. Yellow and flickering blue light filtered from barred front windows as he closed the front door, putting them both in comfortable darkness. "I'm sorry I didn't call sooner," he said quietly. "You're such an asshole, Parker," she said, turning the wheel. "I've missed you too," he admitted. The studio was 2 flights over a pizzeria in Jersey City. The sign on the steel door was faded, and Rachel hit the buzzer several times before they heard the click of the lock releasing. By the way, in full disclosure, this Rachel is neither one of these Rachels. "Let's see the patch," the artist and proprietor said in way of greeting. Chris hung his motorcycle jacket up by the door and pulled his shirt up, turning to show the small area over his waist, a spot of color on his skin. Wolf nodded as he examined it. Bald as an egg, he wore a tapered black and iron-gray beard. His skull was etched with a ring of black barbed wire, his earlobes elongated by double-gauge plugs. "Yeah, it looks good. Let's get you under the lights and make sure you're properly crazy." "There's no doubt about that," Rachel muttered. But she hung her own coat up and followed them over to the table under the spotlights. Ink, needles, wipes, and gloves were all in place, and different prints of the final design were pinned up for reference. "You should talk," Wolf said cheerfully. "How's your cat Tat doing?" She grinned at him. "Still biting me, but not much lately." Chris heard the message in that, and stripped down without comment, down to his waist, and then peeling his jeans back around his hips. "I still like that rose on your back," Wolf said admiringly, as Chris prepared to get on the table. "Thank you," Chris said. Rachel turned away to examine one of the drawings, and Wolf picked up a stencil and started the transfer. When he was done, he nodded briskly as he stripped off his gloves. "All right, take another good long look. Make sure this is what you want." Obediently, Chris got up to look at the mirrors. The design was huge, covering his ribs and the lower part of his chest. On his smoothly shaven skin, the transfer ink looked blurry, but the lines were exactly where they needed to be. Without the thin, dark hair that dusted his body, he looked pale. His eyebrows and the curly hair on his head seemed as dark as the transfer lines. He didn't touch the outline, but stretched and examined the way his new body looked, adorned only by scars and years of self-discipline. "You look so hot," Rachel said from behind him. In her heels, she was 2 inches taller than he was, exactly. He smiled at her in the mirror. "You always thought so," he said. Imagine that. By the way, when I wrote this story, I was listening to the album Story of Patsy Cline about 40 times. See if you could spot the references. "You want music?" Wolf asked, as he started measuring ink into a disposable cup. Chris shook his head and stretched out one more time before getting back on the table. "But feel free to put on whatever you like to work to," he offered. "Ha! You don't know what you got yourself into," Wolf warned. He used a remote to turn on the stereo, and the sound of an older recording started coming out from the speakers. "Heartaches, heartaches." Huh. ZZ Top might have been an obvious guess. Heavy metal, something tribal and trendy might have been good follow-up guesses. Patsy Cline, though. "Yeah," Wolf said cheerfully. "I am one badass motherfucker. Are you ready for the pain? Some people say this is the worst part." "Hurt me now. Get it over," Chris said. He reached out a hand. Rachel sighed and took it as the needle descended. Rachel pulled off the road before they got to the Holland Tunnel, and Chris looked up in surprise. "Oh, you don't get to go back yet," she said. "Ah." On top of a cheap floral bedspread, she unbuttoned his shirt. The outlines were glistening under sheets of plastic bandaging, and she poked at one spot. "Hey now," Chris said. "You asshole," she said softly. He reached up and ran his hands into her mass of thick curly hair, pulling her down for a better kiss than the first one in the car. She pressed against him, and the outline of the tattoo flared into tiny pains and itches. Their bodies shifted, and he turned them onto their sides, pushing his knee between her legs, and she moaned, "Yeah, that's it." She growled lightly, grinding her hips as she crushed herself against his leg. Her brief leather skirt rode up, and she ran one stocking leg across his, abrading her inner thigh along the rougher texture of his jeans. He helped her, tugging the skirt up farther around her waist. He ran his hand across her ass and made false disapproval sounds in her ear as he bit below. "I didn't realize you'd want to fuck," he said in a low voice, not stopping as he worked her panties down her ass cheeks. I didn't... Pack?" She arched an eyebrow at him in amusement. "Since when did you need anything but what you came with to fuck me silly?" Pulling back just slightly, she reached an arm between them into her bra and pulled out a small tangle that unfolded into 2 black latex gloves. If lube is a problem, it's your fucking fault." She bit him back on the lower lip, sharp enough to break the skin, and he grabbed her head again to force their mouths together so hard their teeth scraped. They laughed as they wrestled for position and clothing removal, and when he finally managed to sink his fingers through the tangle of her pubic hair, she stopped her faux struggle to work her hips and take more of him. "I guess you forgive me then," he said, twisting his hand to turn his curled fingers up against her G-spot. He rocked his hand steadily, her slickness easing the way, the smell of her salty and spicy. "Hell no!" Rachel gasped. "You make me crazy." "Crazy for loving you?" She didn't add. Instead, she arched and slammed her hips down over his hand, engulfing him to the wrist, and then farther, getting that treasured exhalation of surprise and that brief look of ecstasy in his eyes before he closed them. True love, she thought, or something close to it. 2 weeks later, the coloring and the shading began. Rachel made the drive from Long Island to Brooklyn and then to Jersey City. Wolf met them at the door, tobacco on his breath, the studio sparkling and ready and smelling of pepperoni. Chris once again let the man choose his sentimental little music. You know, Katie Lang had her start as a Patsy Cline tribute singer, Wolf said, as he put out an array of deep reds, oranges, and blues. Hey, looks like you took good care of the outline. Let's start getting you colored in, shall we? Rachel watched as the claws were done first, Wolf expertly working the gun with one hand and wiping away pools of ink and dots of blood with the other. Chris ground his teeth at the needles as the needles worked on his lower abdomen. Aw, it doesn't hurt that much, Rachel chided. Tickles, he responded between his teeth. She rolled her eyes. It'll hurt more when we get to your ribs, Wolf promised. Not that much, though. You're real good about sitting still. Sometimes, I swear, I want to take these young fuckers who come in to get the latest fucking tribal thing they saw on TV and strap them down to the fucking table. I guess you guys have more experience with that, though, huh? He chuckled as the claws began to take shape, reaching for the skin under the pubic bone. Are you kidding? Chris here thinks bondage is insulting to his personal honor. Yeah, well, at least you don't go all moaning and humping the table like some people I know. Chris smiled and raised an eyebrow at Rachel. She shrugged and grinned, and for a while there was only the buzzing of the machine and the orchestral and choral accompaniment of a rich contralto voice pining away for lovers who would never return. This time, he knew to be prepared for the exit before the tunnel. He was much better prepared. You fucker! You fucker! Rachel cried as she pulled against the rope, anchoring her wrist to one leg of the sturdy old bed. Insulting to my personal honor? He teased, sliding his cock very slowly into her body and then easing it out again. The bandages crinkled across his lower body, and he hissed through his teeth even as he continued to move. Are you feeling insulted yet, sweetheart? Snapping her eyes open, she lifted her legs to wrap around his waist, kicking him, hopefully hitting his kidneys, as she did. Don't fuck with me, Parker, do me! He slammed all the way into her and stretched his body on top of hers, pressing his forearm across her collarbone to push her down. I'll do one better. I'll do you the way you need, he whispered, but you're going to have to ask nicely. Fuck you! She tried to kick him some more. But he was stronger now. God damn it, so much stronger than she was these days. He slapped her once to startle her and used the surprise to force one leg and then the other from around his body. Withdrawing from her soaking pussy, he rose from the bed for more rope and she cursed at him. But there was a feral glee in her eyes, that mysterious kind of pleasure that only came when this one man treated her so badly, made her into someone she really wasn't, just as he made himself into the man he really was. It didn't matter that she had another lover who aroused her body and pleasured her mind. It didn't matter that she had occasional partners to delight her senses and provide variety. The parade of desperate-to-please slaves and would-be slaves were just so many sprinkles on her erotic Sunday. They don't dominate me, she thought with a savage bolt of hunger as Chris tightened the ankle ropes. She pulled against them anyway, hating that hunger, loving it, cherishing it. They don't dominate my mind and soul like you do, god damn it. The few times she tried to turn the tables on him had been complete failures, culminating in that time she tried to get him in a skirt for her pleasure. It wasn't that long ago, but she couldn't ignore the fact that shortly after that disastrous vacation, he'd left Long Island. Sure, it was because that woman summoned him, the woman he always obeyed. But the timing was just so painful. Almost as painful as his cock shoving into her ass, while his fingers tugged on the gold rings through her nipples. Jolts of pleasure mingled with the bright, fiery pain, and she groaned at the stretching heat in her ass. As usual, she swore to herself, she was not going to ask nicely. As usual, she eventually did.